Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to have with us a leading financial expert. He claims he's not, but let's listen to what he has to say. Right now, we have with us Ram Mahidhara. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Ram. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Subodh. I very much appreciate the chance to speak with you and your audience. I'm always very uncomfortable with the word expert because there are far too many experts in this world, but I do have a fair amount of experience, so I'll concede that. Um, I have been in the broad infrastructure finance area for many, many years, although in the last few years, I've started looking at a bunch of other things, including artificial intelligence and the role in infrastructure, and also in the whole play of financial markets and financial inclusion. Being kind of trained in the area of infrastructure and working in it for 25 years, I always used to say that infrastructure is the first thing that every country needs to have. I don't deny that. I still feel that way. But at the same time, I also feel that a solid financial system that allows the flow of funds, access to infrastructure, access to finance, and ability for people to really build, whether it's their families, whether it's their small businesses, whether it's their economies. Financial inclusion is very important, and therefore the financial infrastructure is very important. I'll stop there for a moment. Back to you, Subodh.
Well, you said it better than I have. So, ultimately, the financial infrastructure is the bedrock of merit-based growth. If you want, you know, uh, crony capitalism, and if you want domination by a few large firms, then you don't need a financial structure because the financial structure serves these people.
Correct.
But if you want financial inclusion and you want broad-based, merit-based growth, then there is no option but to do what you're saying. And in 3.5 years ago, I wrote a book, India 2047. And in it, the main recommendation for what we call as the union government was that work with the RBI to develop the financial infrastructure. That is sorely lacking, and we can do all sorts of other things. But unless the young people, the entrepreneurs, can get both debt and equity, sometimes people say, oh, we are giving loans. I say, but, debt is debt. Unless you can get debt and equity, and we are badly missing in most African countries. I've been to several, and in Asia and India also, we are missing the channels. And I won't talk much more, I'll just say one more that we are missing the channels to connect the savers to the risk takers with proper reward for risk taking. Now, that's a task that
It is very much so.
Okay,
Very
so let me stop. It's not my show, it's your show. Please go ahead.
okay. Uh, so the way I've looked at it, perhaps let me kind of talk a little bit about infrastructure, since many people know what it is, but many people defining it is not that easy. And so let me first talk about the physical infrastructure. And physical infrastructure, the way I look at it, is a set of goods and services that form the backbone of an economy. They allow other goods and services to move, to dissipate through the economy, and to reach the final consumer. If uh, if it's if whichever type of infrastructure is available for the average public to consume, i.e., it's not so much who is providing it, it is who is consuming it. So if it is available for everybody to consume, it is considered infrastructure. If it is only for a select few such as a company might build a pipeline dedicated from one part to the other solely for its purpose. That is that is really not infrastructure in the traditional sense.
Mm.
Uh, a slight distinction between public and private infrastructure. Public infrastructure generally is set up by governments, set up by bodies where often the user is not paying or paying far less than the cost of the service. And it could be things like drinking water. It could be things like public roads. It could be public hospitals, even public schools. Private infrastructure often is infrastructure where some or all of the provision comes from private sector sources. The assets may still be held by the government, but the functioning, the operation, the maintenance, the upkeep, all of that is done by the private sector. There, those services are often charged, maybe at a higher rate than would be available freely, but they still are available to the wide public. Contrary to what we think, in a large number of cases, the use of private infrastructure is actually very helpful because it relieves governments who are often very cash strapped. It relieves them um, from putting money in areas which may be much needed, but then it's competing with other areas where they would do better. It also stops them from running enterprises that they're not well set up to run. And as a result, you have fairly good private sector efficiency, fairly good targeting of outcomes, and the government also ends up getting revenues in the process. Sometimes this can be very effective. And I remember the toll booths near Indira Gandhi International Airport on the road to Gurgaon. And there was a concession granted. And it was a 20 or 25-year concession. But they deemed that in 7 years, that that the concessionaire had made enough money that was required and that they had reached as much public as they wanted to, that the government kind of, and I'm not quite sure whether it was a force majeure or whether it was part of the original uh, agreement, but no more tolling was done. So that is unusual, but essentially the provision of services happened. Uh, you see private infrastructure all around the world. You see it in Mumbai, for example. You will see it in uh, there was a sea link that was created. You were paying a certain toll for it. There are many roads, many airports where, well, Delhi is an example. There is GMR and there's GVK in India who are doing this. But it's not just India. This has happened in all parts of the world. So that's kind of in the infrastructure area. That's something I know well. I spent about 25 years financing infrastructure projects, toll roads, container terminals, power plants, etc. And so I think that's it's close to my heart. It's an area where there is so much money needed and so much effort needed and so much talent and cash available in the private sector that it makes sense to privatize a lot of the assets. I'll stop there for a minute.
Okay, I think to me, one example is the cellular infrastructure and the internet also, which is now increasingly financed by private. So those, unlike the telephone and the electricity infrastructure, which was, if not fully government financed, at least heavily led by the government, we don't have this thing in the uh, cellular infrastructure. And you do see that it works well, but there are gaps.
Correct.
Just, I've just come back from coastal California, and you can drive for 3 hours on Highway 1 and not have phone service from T-Mobile.
Correct.
Right. So because you don't have the Roosevelt saying, I've got to electrify each home and each farm, and I've got to get the phone line, no matter the cost, to each and every place. There's nobody saying we need to get the cellular service to each and every place. And my God, if you have a car breakdown, you're really out of luck because
Yeah.
the reason there's not much cellular infrastructure is because there isn't much traffic. And if there isn't much traffic, then there's nobody to even report that you are stranded. So yes, it works very well when it works, but we do recognize that there are gaps uh, in privately provided infrastructure, which there has to be some solution for in the end, but there's nobody found that for the internet in the US. So you have, well, maybe, at some point it says SOS only, which means that there is either Verizon or AT&T, and your 911 call will go through them. And at some point it says no service. It means nobody's providing it. Now, how, you come across a small town, you pass through it in 39 seconds, you have cellular service for 39 seconds. Anyway, that's not my point. Okay, my point is that yes, the modern day is going to be privately financed. And the
Correct. Correct.
question is, how do we set up the country's financial system? I'm all for it. How do we set up the country's financial system so that it can be financed, right?
Correct. Correct.
So go ahead. So I'm not opposing it at all. I'm saying, yeah, it's anyway, even if I oppose it, it's not my place to talk on this show. What I'm saying is that, yes, I support the idea, but the channels have not been figured out in most countries.
That is correct. I mean, the private sector ultimately is not there for the public good. They are driven by shareholders, either private shareholders or the stock market, and they're pushed very hard to generate returns on investment. And so when there are relatively few private sector companies that can actually stand up and say, look, part of our job is to serve the public. There are relatively few in the US. I think that is not a notion that's necessarily that popular. In India, I think the Tatas have done their fair share of going out of the way of being looking at social needs as much as commercial needs. Uh, so that's something to think about. But that is so I do not think private sector or private provision of infrastructure is a panacea for everything. I think it is a very efficient way of relieving government burden on governments which are cash strapped. It is a way of providing better services, which you hold the private sector to account with service levels and with and make sure that their pricing is not rapacious and so on. But beyond that, that leaves the government funds for other things, and that's where you would come, and you need to have some sort of a mechanism where there's got to be some amount of incentive for servicing areas like Highway 1 or in the desert or somewhere else. And certainly, I think internet reach in the rural parts of America is still lacking. It's still poor. And I think the availability of internet is really one of it, it's it's one of the metrics you can use to kind of gauge whether a country is rich or poor. And it's also the way you disseminate education. It's also the way you disseminate financial inclusion. So I think it's very important. Uh, I want to switch gears a little bit, Subodh, and talk a little bit about something that's in the last 4 years, that has become so popular, and that is artificial intelligence. I mean, it's a catch-all term for everything,
Mhm.
but the use of artificial intelligence, both in infrastructure and in the healthcare sector. These are two areas where I feel there's a tremendous gain that's going to come through. In infrastructure, I feel where it's going to be. where it has played and where it will continue to play is in the role of maintenance, both predictive maintenance and anticipatory maintenance. It can play a role in terms of smart cities and designs. And this isn't something new. This conversation has been in the works for at least 15 years that people have talked about. But a lot of artificial intelligence really depends upon the availability and the collection and the harnessing of data. I mean, if you take power plants and you have a good AI program managing the whole process, it can come up with the optimal ways to produce electricity in terms of, especially if you have multi-fuel sources or when to have downtime. You predict when demand is coming
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
In some cases where turning up or turning down the amount of electricity consumed uh, uh, is very easy, whether it's a hydropower dam or something else of that sort, where it's relatively smooth to do it, that's fine. But in other cases where you have a little bit of lead time involved, uh, it's something that can play a very big role. It can play a role in maintenance. So you know when to kind of put down
Mm,
time, when
mm,
to have planned maintenance and that.
mm.
It can do that in terms of distribution and grids. I mean, Boulder, Colorado has a smart grid where they're constantly balancing,
Yeah.
reducing outages and so on.
Yeah.
But it's not just there. I mean, you take Singapore, and again, Singapore is first world pretty much,
Yeah.
but you have the smart grid and the smart city.
Yeah.
You have transportation, you have time of the day pricing on
Mm,
tolling, you have
mm,
traffic light coordination with traffic flows.
mhm,
And this isn't rocket science. It's sensors embedded in there. And you can take Valencia, for example, where you have the smart water network. And
mm,
that is really, they've got thousands of sensors embedded in pipes. They've got sensors embedded elsewhere. It can track, and those are sending in every millisecond, every second, they're sending in data to a centralized data system. So you are harnessing all this data. If you're noticing a gradual drop in pressure, you can catch it immediately and say, is this a precursor to a big leak that's
mhm.
happening? And again, I think the use of artificial intelligence in infrastructure is tremendous. It's going to happen. Bridge maintenance, right? Road, if there's a pothole, you can avoid it. But if there's a bridge and there's a crack and you have a fundamental issue, that's potentially fatal. So those things I think are very important. Healthcare is another place. Uh, there have been lots of studies done in dental x-rays on records, in terms of cavities, in terms of bone decay, in terms of others, but not just that, regular x-rays too, regular MRI reading. Machines are so good at catching stuff that the human eye cannot do, that they are great to help existing radiologists, existing doctors and dentists identify things, do all the routine work very easily, so that then you can use your human brain to really figure out what is next, what can we do.
Yeah.
You can use artificial intelligence I mean, Philadelphia, I'm sitting here and University of Pennsylvania hospitals are right across. And they just talked about a baby that had an unusual disease where it was not able to digest food and protein was an issue. And they used CRISPR and they came up with a modified genetic therapy exclusively tailored for that baby,
Mm,
which is now making a huge difference, which will make the difference between life and death for that child. And that is today. I can guarantee you that in the next few years, there'll be maybe 10 years, there'll be a remedy
mm,
for you and for me that'll be completely different based
mm.
upon our health.
Yeah.
And another 10, 15 years, and it'll become much cheaper where it's available in Africa, where it's available in India, where it's available everywhere around the world. So I think those are areas where I know people are worried about AI, are worried about job loss, or worried about
Mm,
a lot of things. But the
mm,
way I look at it, this is a boom. There are obvious dangers in terms of privacy of data, in
mm,
terms of
mhm.
bias in data, in terms of all of that. And in terms of fraud that's happening, right? With that, in terms of so much. So with every good comes bad, right? A car is a loaded weapon in a bad driver's hand. Do we ban all cars? No. But 100 years ago, everybody said you shouldn't have cars because it's dangerous. So I think we're going to get there. That's another area I feel very strongly about.
Well, I'm aware of this CRISPR baby in Philadelphia. It is indeed a remarkable achievement. That, is the second or third time that I've read of a remarkable health outcome only through the use of AI and ML,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is not possible without it. So, yes, it is very much there. And when you look at the inability of the medical profession, the doctors, to keep up and to have horizontal knowledge, and there's only so much they can know, but the knowledge is there. And there's simply no way that they know what is all happening, what has been done where. And so obviously you need, if you can have an agency or an app or a bot that can search it and give it to you, and then that's it. You need it.
Correct.
You need
Correct.
it. You need it.
Correct.
There's just no way around that at all. So I agree with you that infrastructure, even DC, Washington DC changed its grid uh, starting in 2000, and they started automating things. And of course, that was not AI, that was just standard computerization. But there was hints, there was no AI at that time. But yeah, it's obvious that if you're going to, what you talked about is dispatch. If you're going to do dispatch, and then AI will obviously be better than, I mean, not better than, but very helpful to the dispatcher.
Correct, correct. And
Right.
again, in power, there are kind of three places, right? There's
Yeah.
the generation of power where you can use AI for maintenance of the fact of the
Mm.
power plant and all that. Then there's transmission. Again,
Yeah.
transmission has huge losses depending on the distances you're
Yeah.
going, et cetera, et cetera. And are there more smart ways of doing it over
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And then there's the distribution. Once it gets to a city or an urban area, how do
Yeah.
you kind of efficiently do that?
Yeah.
How do you see where you are having load losses, where you're having unauthorized losses, where you're having, a line down, and so
Mm.
on and so forth. So I think you can do that
Mm.
in many cases. I, I want to switch for a moment.
Sure.
I switch for a moment to the other thing that I think is so critical for development. Uh, and I saw this. I know you're aware. I mean, you and I both spent 20 plus years in various stints at the World Bank Group. You were at the bank, I believe, and I was in the IFC.
Hmm.
And of the 22 years I spent at IFC, I spent 11 years out of Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
and 11 years based, 8.5 years in Africa and 2.5 based in Hong Kong.
Mm.
And so I traveled
Mm.
a lot of parts of Africa. And I remember in those days, there was a lot of talk about M-Pesa, which was in Kenya,
Yes.
the whole way in which you had a you had a place where you had traffic cops who were on the take, wanted to stop you, and you paid them a little money, and then you moved on for the violation, real or perceived. And then it came to a point where the traffic cops were willing to take the bribe on M-Pesa. And unfortunately, they got caught at some point.
Yeah.
But it was just a fluid flow of funds.
Yeah.
But when I look at India, I know you've been a little bit uh, not so much critical, but you've said that there's still a lot more to be done in
Yeah.
India. And I think still India has made such tremendous progress in terms of financial inclusion, whether it's through the UPI, whether it's through the Aadhaar system,
Mm.
and whether using that to kind of bypass the middleman or the middle person, getting benefits, whether it's income benefits or whatever it is, directly to the end user. The ease with which you can make payments, and I still marvel because I don't live in India. I marvel maybe if I lived there, it would be again second nature to me. But I was visiting my sister-in-law. She lives in Gurgaon. I was visiting India and I was with my sister-in-law. And we were driving home in an Uber. And my sister-in-law tells the Uber person, Bhaiya zara idhar rukna ek bari, which to the non-Hindi speaking audience means, sir, could you stop here for a minute? And she stopped at a grocery store. She rolled the window down and she called out to the shopkeeper, somebody whom she knew, and said, could you give me a packet of milk and four tomatoes or something like that? The guy came and he brought a little tin or a cardboard QR code. She just took out her phone, she scanned the thing. This whole thing probably took under a minute, the whole thing. And off we went to her house. And the UPI, she used Paytm or whatever it was, or Google Pay or whatever it was, and it was done.
Yeah.
And this ease with which you can make payments, the ease with which you can have financial transactions, I think I think between the Reserve Bank, between the government, and between a push for financial inclusion, I think India's made huge, huge strides. Um, and that I believe is an infrastructure that not only can but actually must be exported to other countries so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, especially poor countries. I would contend that France, Germany, etc., any country can make use of that infrastructure, but certainly in developing countries that cannot put a lot of money into it, this will go. It may not be the perfect system, but it will go a long way in moving things forward.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree with you on that. There's no dispute in my mind on that issue, that it is homegrown and it's very good.
yes, yes,
It's very pervasive. Not only it's very good, it's very pervasive. I I listen to so many people who do Vidped with me. So I don't, since I don't ask questions, I just listen to what they tell me. And you hear it all the time.
yes,
Look,
yes.
so it's very clear that in India, in the payments, is not at all. I mean, I know that in China, the New York Times report, Financial Times reporter wrote that I had 100 yuan bill in my wallet, and in one whole year, I never got to use it
And
because
it's
it
the
is
same
so
thing.
pervasive.
Yes.
It is so pervasive, but it is very, except for, off the table transactions, cash, for which reason the cash actually, total money supply outstanding is actually going up in India. But the normal transactions are not anymore in cash.
Correct.
Right. So this is very good. It's very pervasive, very fast, very convenient, and easily understandable by everybody. So yes, I agree on that. And I agree with you that it is exportable.
And not just that, but also a national identification system. Again, there is always the Western part, having lived here 40 years, that worries about privacy and worries about misuse of some information like that. But the availability, on the other hand, the availability of biometric information,
Yeah.
where you don't have to be educated or literate. Illiterate people are often far more educated than most of us, but where you don't have to be literate and you can still have a bank account, still have money deposited to you, paid to you, etc. So I think it's a game changer because you can't. I mean, you can't change your iris scan that easily. You can't change your fingerprint that easily. And with that, maybe even in poor villages, you can uh, get funds. So I think that's
Yes, you can actually get funds. The subsidy distribution is very efficient.
correct.
It is now very efficient. There's no question about it. By the way, on the Aadhaar card, I have a draft of a book on public policy in which there's one part on the Aadhaar card,
Mhm,
how it
mhm.
was created and how it works and so on. And so those issues of privacy and all are there. There's some
Correct.
constitutional issues are also present.
Correct.
But overall, my conclusion on that section is that it is a stunning marvel of low cost engineering done at home. So it is a
Correct.
marvel, there's no
Correct.
question about it. Uh,
Correct.
Even though the courts say you don't use it, it's actually everybody uses it, which is anyway. Let's not get too
No,
deep
no, but
into those
that
issues.
is an issue
But
where
yes,
I think
so I've written on that book. I hope will be out soon. It's a big, it has many topics. One of them is the Aadhaar card.
correct.
Uh, but as a anyway, let's not get into. It's not my talk time to talk. I want to
No,
listen.
no, but
Yeah,
still, I mean,
yeah,
I think the point you're making, and I'm not diminishing
yeah.
misuse of the information that helps make this the wonder it is. And I also think that we are a little more casual, perhaps, in some of this, and given the size of the country, perhaps there is less ability to enforce. And the same thing with AI, right? There is also the ability to scam. You can make copies of somebody's voice, and you can do all sorts of things.
Mm.
So yes, there is danger, and I think I just look at it as the net benefit is still quite positive, and we have to move forward, and we've got to come up with all alternatives. So those were kind of some of the things on the top of my head that I wanted to talk in terms of subject matter.
Okay. But tell us a bit about your personal side. I mean, how you made your decisions and all that, because people want to know who you are rather than what you've accomplished also. At least in my channel, that's a normal part.
Sure,
Okay,
sure, sure.
who the hell are you anyway? Not
Yeah.
I have accomplished this and I have accomplished that. That's available in textbooks
No,
and
no, that's right.
articles.
And
But who you are is not available. So tell us about yourself and, whatever you want to share.
sure, sure. And I must tell you that I hope nothing I've said suggested I accomplished anything. I was
No, no, it's okay.
barely
That's not.
sharing.
Let's not talk about it.
No, but
Let's
I was
because the
sharing what
channel is not to.
fascinates me.
Yeah.
I was
I'm
sharing
not
what
saying
fascinates
anybody is
me.
a. Then I have people on this channel who are first year BA students. Okay, they are obviously. I said, look, you are a first year BA student. That itself is an accomplishment if you
I
are in
agree.
a
I
good
agree. I
educational
agree.
institution. So anyway, just tell us something about your personal side so
So
that.
I so I grew up in India. I was born in Hyderabad, but I lived first 22 years of my life that I lived in India. I lived in Delhi, Lucknow, Aligarh. So my mother tongue is Telugu, but my Hindi and Urdu are far better than my Telugu. I
Mhm,
can speak Telugu reasonably well.
mhm,
I cannot read and write Telugu because I never grew up in Andhra and I
mhm,
just never learned. I can read and write Hindi. Uh, I went to Pilani, where my parents sent me to get a degree, but I think I ended up getting a degree second and ended up meeting my spouse. So I keep telling people that I got both, I got my spouse and then the degree too.
Okay.
Uh, we were, and then we came to the US in
There I
19.
have to stop you because at MIT I got my degree and my spouse.
Okay, well, that's it. That's it. There you go. There you
I
go.
do have to say,
Yes.
it prolonged my stay there a little bit because I couldn't leave while she hadn't finished.
Yes, yes, and I did. I also stayed a year, and that was because we chose to have our first daughter. She was
Yeah,
born, and so Deepa took a year off
yeah.
and then worked on her dissertation, and then came back a year later and finished
Okay.
it.
All
So
right.
that's what happened,
Yeah.
and then we spent time in Chicago for a few years, where I did some work with. The Chicago Fed and the University of Illinois. Then I worked with an oil and gas company. I was always focused on the private sector. I wanted to be where decisions were made. And then I joined the World Bank Group. And after that, after 22 years, I felt I had done everything that I wanted to. I had another 7 years to go.
Mm,
And I just felt I wanted to do something else.
mm.
So I got out, began consulting, and then we started a startup, three of us.
But before you go there, a lot of people want to know what it is like to work for IFC. And I can't say I know it because I never worked for IFC. You're the first one on this channel who's had work experience with IFC. So maybe you tell us a little bit about what it is like to work for them.
Sure. So the one thing I really liked about IFC, I think that there are two or three things. IFC of today is not the IFC I joined. I joined it when we were 1,500 people, with most of us, a good number of us being in operations or the investment departments, as they were called.
Mhm.
Um, Also, those were early days, so many of the projects we did were really among the first or some of the first ones to be done. They made a difference. You felt that you had a little role in something. IFC grew. IFC also has now today, it has there are two differences. One is that IFC has as many people in the advisory side as it has in the investment side. Advice I simply don't know. In my mind, the jury is out as to how much the advisory side uh, can further the scope of private sector. I think to the extent that they are helping them privatize, etc., that group I think is quite good and powerful. But there's a lot of other advisory work that it's not entirely clear to me. I simply don't understand it of how much how much value addition there is. And I'm not saying it isn't, it's just I don't understand it. So let me be very clear on that. Uh, and so I still feel operations is the core and investment is the core of IFC. And so I miss a little bit of that. So that's one. The second part is that IFC, because it's now been incorporated into the bank, the difference between IFC and the bank, the way I saw it was that the World Bank's bosses were their clients. The governments of the world were also the clients of the World Bank, whereas in our case, we were quite separate. So we could really come up with what made sense for the private sector. We didn't necessarily face any pressure, formal or informal. I feel IFC has become far more integrated into the World Bank. Integration is good so far as you should be coordinated, but I'm not entirely convinced that that is necessarily good for the private sector kind of attitude, focus, motive. That's just my personal bias. And that was partly the reason where I felt it was time for me to do something else. Working in IFC was fun. Uh, you project timelines were much smaller than the World Bank. World Bank would take, when you're doing something, sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years to see the impact of what you're doing. Sometimes could be a little longer. Whereas in our case, if you had a project, I mean, I often mention Bujagali as one. Bujagali now took many years to fructify, but when they turned the switch on, it doubled power available generation in Uganda.
Yeah.
At one
Just
switch.
for those who don't know, Buchigali is a dam that was built in Uganda some time back. It took a long time to get it done, from
Correct.
the time that it was conceived, and it is a large addition to the power generation there.
Correct. It's on.
When he's talking about the flipping the switch, it is really adding substantially to the power generation capacity of the country. Okay, go
Correct. And
ahead.
that's just one country, but
Yeah.
there are others. And I know I mentioned other examples. When you have a country that does exports and you've got a substantial upgrade to the container terminals there, right? So then suddenly what you see is it is now helping that country's exports in a much more systematic way. And that has follow-on, knock-on effects on
Mm,
rest of it. You have better refrigeration systems
mm,
because you can send agricultural
mm,
exports.
mm,
You have then that further you have more systematized agriculture. You have warehouses, you have logistics, you have all that sort of thing. So I think there are knock-on effects that you can see. The larger the country, the smaller you feel your contribution is. at that time. The smaller the country, the larger you can see, the more immediate you can see. So it was a lot of fun. I liked it. You always worked with the private sector. And so no matter how much of babugiri we wanted to do, how much of bureaucracy was pushed upon us internally or externally, uh, we had to respond to our client at some point. Either the client was frustrated and walked away, or the client pushed us and we had to respond. So I think there was a good amount of discipline there, which I liked. Uh, Compared to the private sector, I think we were still very slow. And I think so it was fun. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Mhm.
And I felt that I had done many things that I wanted to do. It was time for me to go on. But that's something we like.
Okay.
IFC was very small. The World Bank was the 800-pound gorilla within the group. We were the small part. And then systematically, IFC was doing more and more volume. And in the end, IFC's volumes matched that of the World Bank at some point. So the whole group became very large. And we learned a lot. You learned about because for us a project wasn't done till the deal was signed, not just approved by the board, but it was signed. And then once you put a project in, it may have a 5, 10, 15-year life. As a portfolio manager, you have to monitor it throughout to make sure that you're getting repaid on your loan. You're
Hmm.
getting repaid or you're getting a good equity return,
Hmm.
if it was equity. IFC is three-quarters of every dollar IFC would invest would be, I use the word invest loosely, but would put out would be in the form of long-term debt, and
Hmm.
about 20%, 15, 20% in the form of equity,
Hmm.
and then some risk management products. So there was always at least some amount of market signals coming back to you. So I felt that was good for discipline.
Hmm.
Maybe not enough, but good to start with. Um, what else can I say?
Oh, okay, that's good enough. Sorry to interrupt, but it's good enough. Tell us about your startup if you want to.
Yeah, well, the startup started up and then we sunsetted also. We ran it for 3 years. It was really a web-based platform that companies were using to manage their carbon footprint and that
Hmm.
of their supply chain.
Hmm.
So we were helping them, calculate their scope 1, scope 2,
Hmm.
scope 3 emissions.
Hmm.
But we also said when you have a supply chain, and in most
Hmm.
industrial sectors,
Hmm.
Scope 3 is 80%, 90% of your total emissions.
Hmm.
And it's important to know out of your 4 or 5 or 6,000 or 20,000 suppliers, which 200, 500, which 5% are really critical to your carbon footprint, critical to your financial footprint, and therefore critical to you strategically. Because you could have somebody, a supplier, who is very critical to you, may not be the largest supplier, but very
Hmm.
critical to you, and they get caught
Hmm.
doing something
Hmm.
advertently or inadvertently.
Hmm.
If that shuts down and it's a vital material in your supply chain and you cannot substitute it immediately, you have a problem. If you are a restaurant and you're buying chips and the one or potato chip manufacturer shuts down, you can buy them from another source. If you're an auto manufacturer and you're buying computer chips, these are specialized chips. If you've got a downstream person who's shut down or in violation or having a problem, it may take you 2, 3, 4 months,
Hmm.
even a year to find an alternative producer who
Hmm.
can produce what you want.
Yeah.
So strategically, you need to think through this properly. We loved it. I think in some cases, the absence of regulations in our target markets, whether it was Brazil or whether it was the United States, that required the reporting, that required emissions reportings to that
Hmm.
extent,
Hmm.
did not work in our favor.
Hmm.
We needed more money to develop the sort of bells and whistles.
Hmm.
And everybody loved the product. Nobody wanted to pay for it. So as a result, we having supervised investments and being disciplined about it. We had to be disciplined with our own money, and we
mm,
said, it's time to stop. We
mm,
can't put any more money into it, and we stopped it. So since then, I've focused on risk and governance, become a qualified risk director. I've been working on a couple of courses, which I've one on the business case for climate change, which I think is climate change is here. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. It's here. It's inevitable. We are facing it and we've got to deal with it. And there are solid business cases for companies to deal with it.
mm,
So that's an area that I'm working on.
mm,
Um, I also prepared a course on just international private sector development finance. Uh, I think I'm thinking of combining these and a couple of other topics, cybersecurity and just risk and governance, as into a common course that
mm.
says current topics in international business. And I'm just beginning to talk to schools to see if I can come in as a guest lecturer or teach
Mm.
something. I'm talking to some folks in India. I'm talking to some folks here. That's something that's happening.
It's very, very enterprising, I must say. But I think we're coming to sort of the end here. Let's have the final word.
So the final word is, and since you have a lot of young people, and the last thing they want is life lessons from an old fogey,
What they do
I'll tell you
want.
what has worked for me.
Yeah.
I think relationships, human relationships, treating people with respect and being treated the way you want to is incredibly important. I have formed relationships with my clients over 40 years,
Mm,
with my friends over 40 years. My college, Bitspilani, our 76 batch, is now meeting on the 50th anniversary of our joining bits. Our children know their children. We've been to their children's weddings and they've been
mm,
to our weddings. If we need anything, you don't know the person. You just call up and say, hi,
mm,
I'm a Bitsian. I need your help. They don't ask questions, no
mm,
matter where they are in the world.
mm,
And it's not just bits, it's there with all your colleges. It's there with relationships. It's good
mm,
to have long-term relationships.
mm.
So that I think is really, really important. Um, I think for the younger generation, they have far less constraints than we did. There is so many risks people can take, so many things to
Mm,
pursue.
mm,
Follow your heart. Many of us can't do that because we may have financial constraints, we may have other constraints, but to the extent you can, follow your heart and have fun and be good and kind. Honestly, kindness, I think, goes such a long way. We
mm,
forget these things in this world,
mm,
but just kindness and respect,
mm,
I like it. I like when people behave like that
mm,
towards me. It
mm,
pushes me to behave like that
mm,
towards them.
mm.
Uh, it sounds very sappy and it sounds very different, but I honestly say this is probably what makes the world go around and what makes us human.
Okay, that's a very optimistic note to end on. Let's end it here. I need to talk to you a little bit offline. I'll be
Sure.
back with another young person or an expert who may or may not agree that he or she is an expert, but I think they're an expert. Let's end it here today. Ram, thank you so much for such a candid, wide-ranging set of issues. I will talk to you a little bit offline. Till then, bye everybody.
Thank you, Subodh. Pleasure to be here.